So my name's Professor Alex Horsley. I'm a professor of respiratory medicine in Manchester, and I work in the Manchester Adult CF Centre here, and I'm involved in working on lung modelling and understanding lung physiology with a number of collaborators for some time. So why is this important? Well, we've heard a little bit from Bindi about the impact of respiratory diseases, but it is, something that is very much overlooked and very, very important. Respiratory diseases are the third biggest cause of death in the UK. And they have traditionally been quite underrepresented in terms of research funding. Our treatments, particularly for airways diseases, haven't really changed that much in recent years, and perhaps we lack targets for some of these treatments. Perhaps we lack new understanding on how to approach these. From a clinical perspective, there's certainly a great need to advance understanding and improve patient care. So how does BIOREME come into this? BIOREME is not one thing. We're not building one model, but what we're looking to do is leverage the power of a number of different technologies that have emerged over the last few years, technologies and understanding, and to bring these together. So to bring together different experts from across the UK. And what you can see here at the bottom right, that's a sort of network graph of all the different universities and different collaborators who are already within BIOREME. But it's very much an open network, and we're looking for more collaborators and more people to come in. We want to bring people together and to focus on areas of need, to focus on new areas of need that have not been identified, and to bring people in to solve these problems. So we have three broad thematic areas. One is clinical trials, one is early detection of disease, and one is COVID-19. But we are broader than that. So although we focus on those, that's really just a starting point. So this slide really just talks a little bit, I suppose, about what different sorts of models are. But I think what's really key here is that there is not a single model of lung function or behavior of anything within the lung. And actually what we need is models tailored to the problem. So if there is a specific clinical problem, we develop a model specifically for that, using the best clinical information we can, and that's advanced hugely, particularly with imaging and lung physiology. So putting the right information into it, using the right tools and computing to understand it, and then applying that in clinically relevant ways. And in fact, in many cases, it's a combination of different modelling approaches. We've seen that from the previous examples as well. Some of this information may be drawn at a cellular level, some of this information may be drawn at a much larger whole lung level. And this really just gives some examples of how modelling has been and is being used in respiratory medicine. So I said these are Salman's slides, so he will talk to these in more detail. But one of the things that we've known for some time really is that spirometry is a very insensitive tool to early disease progression. And it very much tends to reflect what happens in the larger airways. So you can get peripheral disease without being able to pick it up. And what we need is tools that can detect disease below the limit of spirometry, and we can use modelling to help understand how disease progresses and what those kind of tools are. We do have lung models. Lung models do exist already, particularly, for example, for deposition of drugs into airways, but these are designed around the healthy lung, and that's very much not what happens. The way air goes into lungs is very much different in people with different diseases, and will differ between diseases as well. So delivering an inhaled drug or a nebulized drug into a diseased lung is not the same as delivering it into a healthy lung. But that's never really been tested very much clinically, and certainly hasn't been modeled properly either. And these are the kind of ways in which we can use mathematical understanding to improve our clinical understanding and improve clinical trials. So someone's got an example here of precision in clinical trials, and this one actually is a COVID trial where patients who have COVID but different characteristics are put into a systems model to determine which therapy they should have. These are some of the data from this as well, but I'm afraid I won't be able to talk to that in detail. But the important concept here is that we can use models to improve clinical trials, either from data coming in from patients or by selecting patients in advance by having previously applied some understanding to their lungs. We can model specific patients using CT to model on an individual level, or we can model on a population level and phenotype patients. So what are the challenges? Well, going forward, one of the really big things that BIOREME wants to do is engage a much wider range of stakeholders. So models previously been developed by either mathematicians or physics specialists working on a specific problem, or clinicians who again bring their own bias and their own focus to things. What we want to do really is to bring people who haven't necessarily thought about this, but also bring people who thought about it at different levels together, so we can identify the problems which are most easily solvable, and identify also if we need more clinical information to inform these models, how we go about doing that. We need to ensure that these models are reproducible, valid, and trustworthy, and that may involve clinical studies, it may involve additional data being collected. Ultimately, though, it's the final 2 points of this where BIOREME hopes to have an impact, and that's around designing models to problems that we can then implement and can be adopted into clinical practice, which ultimately we hope will generate impact for patients. So that brings me to the end of this presentation. I will be very happy in the Q&A afterwards to answer any other questions about the clinical aspects and clinical ambitions of BIOREME. And I will hand over now to my colleague, Professor Declan Bates, who will talk about a clinical application. Thank you.